Rome dawned, wrapped in a fog thick, as if the own city were containing her breath. The bells of St. Peter's Basilica rang out with a cadence solemn, resounding over the heads of thousands of faithful who crowded in the plaza. None, he spoke. Everyone looked in one direction only, the chimney that rose above the Sistine Chapel. In a heart from the Vatican, the silence became heavier than the marble of its columns. The corridors that once housed the diplomatic laughter and the murmurs of power were now immersed in a disturbing silence. Something was about to change, something profound, irreversible. In every corner of the Catholic world, it was repeated, the same question: who will be the next to wear the white? But what is very few, they knew that this election would not be like the previous ones, because this time the signs were not of continuity, but of rupture. It was not just about choosing a new spiritual leader. There was something else, something that seemed to have been written a long time ago, centuries. And then it happened. The smoke white suddenly emerged, tearing the grey sky. Screams, tears, prayers. The announcement, it was clear, forceful, unexpected: Habemus Papam, Leo XIV, a name that had not been heard for a while, centuries, and now returns with echoes of ancient prophecies. The world witnessed a fact that, although it is no longer unpublished, it continues shuddering the bowels of Catholicism: the resignation of the previous pope, a figure who for years was a face of the Church, now retiring silently, like a dissolving shadow in his sunset. The official reasons they spoke of: physical fragility and spiritual exhaustion. But in the inner corridors of the Vatican, the explanations were others. Some cardinals, they whispered about internal pressures, veiled threats, even broken agreements. Others simply were going down the look, as if the weight of the knowledge them prevented hold it. During his pontificate, the Church faced storms: scandals, financial, cover-ups, deep theological divisions. The Western world was moving further and further away from the faith, while regions of the global South demanded a leadership new, bolder, more human, or perhaps more divine. But it was not only ecclesiastical politics that marked its end. It was the atmosphere, as if the Holy Spirit himself would have slowly withdrawn, leaving behind him an echo of abandonment. A disturbing feeling took hold of the clergy. The time is accelerating. Something is coming. With the vacant seat, the Vatican became in an invisible battlefield. Ideological factions began to position themselves: traditionalists, modernists, and progressives hidden under cassocks, ancient, all with a single mission: to influence the next vote. And among all that tension, a figure emerged that many considered unlikely: a cardinal who was not the bookmakers' favorite, neither the most media-friendly, but that, in silence, had tissue alliances, generated respect, and inspired awe. While the world debated names known, within the Vatican was brewing other choice, one that did not obey statistics or consensus, but a destiny written in ancient symbols and forgotten manuscripts. The end of an era was not simply the departure of a pope. It was the fall of a balance precarious, the prelude to something much major. The stage, perfect for a new Leon, will wake up. When the doors of the Sistine Chapel closed with a dull sound, the world was left outside, and the mystery inside. In that moment, 120 cardinals sealed an ancestral pact of silence, surrounded by frescoes that narrate her final judgment and genesis, as if the Michelangelo himself would watch them from above. Nobody comes in, nobody sail. All contact with the exterior is cut off. It is the most hermetic and sacred rite of Catholicism, the conclave, a process that has remained unchanged for centuries, full of rituals that border on the esoteric. Every vow, a prayer; every written name, a revelation; every whisper, a miniature war. At first, everything seems ceremonial: processions, hymns in Latin, prayers. But under that surface, a solemn battle of ideas, influences, and power disguised as holiness is fought. Pressure groups form like small kingdoms: the conservatives who dream with restoring the Iron Church, the reformers who clamour for open windows, those who obey geopolitical interests disguised as spirituality. And meanwhile, the ballots are piling up. Smoke. 1, 2, 3 times. The world looks with anxiety. Why they take so long? What forces are in game? Is there more to it than mere doctrinal differences? There is talk of visions, of signs celestial, even of omens during the nights of the conclave. Some cardinals, according to later rumours, claimed having felt a presence in the room. Others, they were silent, but their eyes, they spoke of fear. Sistine Chapel isn't just a polling place. It's a threshold between the human and the divine. And this year, more than ever, it seemed that forces invisible, they pulled the strings, until, unexpectedly, the vote changed pace. A name began to repeat itself with growing insistence. One who was not in the pools, neither in the headlines. One that evoked strength, history, and warning. When they were reached, 2/3 necessary, an invisible sigh toured the enclosure. The chosen one accepted with a phrase that, according to one of the witnesses, froze the blood of those present. "I accept, in name of the lion that roars in he desert." The doors opened hours later. A crowd was waiting. The smoke-white rose, slowly but definitely. A scream crossed St. Peter's Square, "Habemus Papam," and the name was pronounced, Leo XIV. Not only was there started a new papacy, it had activated a prophecy. When he Cardinal Protodeacon pronounced he name Leo XIV, a murmur toured the square like an electric current. It was not a name common, it was not a neutral name. It was an echo that came from the deepest corners of the history of the Church. The last pope who carried that name, it was Leo XIV, known for his encyclical on the work and for slightly opening the Vatican's windows to the modern world. But the most memorable were the first, Leo XIV, called the Great, and Leo X, the pontiff who presided when Martin Luther broke with Rome. The first, Leo XIV, became in legend when faced with just his word to Attila himself, the king of the Huns, who managed to remove the scourge of God from Rome. His figure was associated with the protection, firmness, and spiritual power against the threats of chaos. For many, he was the incarnation of the Lion of Judah, symbol of the Messiah in the Apocalypse. Leo X, on the other hand, was a pope of excesses, art, and corruption. His papacy marked the start of the Protestant schism. One name, 2 legacies, one of sacred glory, one of spiritual ruin. Therefore, choosing that name today could not be a coincidence. Because now, why this man decided identify with such a powerful and ambiguous figure? Some theologians see in his choice a warning sign. A new Leon has arrived, not to keep the status quo, but to roar, to divide, to fulfill a mission marked by the conflict. Others, they believe it is a sign of hope, of a return to the most mystical root of the faith, to a church that no longer negotiates with the modern world, but it challenges. And there is those who go further. They say that the name It was chosen based on ancient codices that link the lineage of popes with prophetic visions, that the new pope did not choose his name not by chance, but because it was destined, because he knew that his appearance marked the fulfillment of a cycle, of a seal, of something sealed as centuries are now revealed. Leo XIV is not just a name, it's a statement, a warning, a roar. Under the imposing figure of the new pope, hidden behind the whiteness ceremonial, hides a man whose life has remained in the shadows, until now. His secular name was not known to the majority. Cardinal Matteo Luciani, born in a remote region from northern Italy, near the mountains where they once lived hermits and visionaries medieval. From a young age, he was considered a child prodigy for his intellectual gifts and for a strange spiritual sensitivity that defied all rational explanation. At the age of 16, he is said to have had a mystical experience in an abbey Benedictine. According to witnesses, he was found unconscious in front of a crucifix with the eyes open and an expression of ecstasy. From that day, his life changed. He left lay life and dedicated himself entirely to the study of the scriptures, theology, and silence. Luciani did not seek prominence. He never was a face visible from the Roman Curia. He refused interviews, avoided cameras, and moved between corridors dark with humility, almost ghostly. But his influence grew in the more discreet circles. He was an advisor to powerful cardinals, a mediator in ecclesiastical conflicts, and, according to unofficial sources, keeper of classified documents in the Vatican's secret archives. His career, it was meteoric but silent. Unlike others, she did not rise through ambition, but through an aura of inevitability. Where others they did politics, he inspired devotion. Even his opponents confessed feel restless in his presence, as if something in his gaze on them would cross. He was known for speaking little, but with phrases that left footprint. In a private homily in Africa, he said, "The church must not adapt to the world. You must remind you who is your creator." His detractors, it were called, ultra-conservative. His followers, mystical. But what no one can deny is that the election as Pope was, in part, a surprise, and in part a response to an ancient cry, that of a church that wants to return to what is essential, to the sacred fire that the founded. Who is Leo XIV, then? A reformer disguised as a traditionalist, a visionary, an envoy? There are those who, they believe that he was elected not because the men, but by a superior force, that his arrival, it was prophesied in codices that never came to light, that his voice will be the last before the great purification. In his first speech, he did not ask for applause. He did not do political winks. He only said, "The lion has awoken," and he roars not for glory, but for judgment. His words were not understood by everyone, but something changed in the air. Already it wasn't just a new pope. He was a presence, a figure who doesn't lead, but challenges, who doesn't guide, but transforms. And now the world watches, not knowing whether to feel hopeful or fearful. From the moment the name Leo XIV was pronounced before the crowd gathered in St. Peter's Square, the echo not only resonated in the hallways of the Vatican, but also in the occult circles of theologians, mystics, and prophecy scholars ancient. The first in re-emerge was the enigmatic prophecy of St. Malachi, a text attributed to the Archbishop Irish of the 12th century, which described, in symbolic phrases, a complete list of popes up to the end of the times. According to many interpreters, Leo XIV would be the penultimate, or even the last, true pontiff before the Roman Peter, who would preside the church during the Great Tribulation. But it wasn't the only sign. The Marian apparitions of Fatima have gained strength again, in particular the famous Third Secret, which for decades has been surrounded by suspicions and half-revelations. In he, according to leaked testimonies, a figure dressed in white walks among corpses in a city in ruins before being hit by arrows and gunfire. Does this refer to a martyr pope, or one who witnesses the spiritual ruin of the world? And then there is Nostradamus, whose quatrains are so ambiguous as they are fascinating. One of them mentions a young lion rising in middle of the spiritual desolation. Many it have been linked to secular leaders, but now eyes are pointing towards Rome. The matches pile up, symbols line up. Leo XIV himself does not seem to escape from these omens. In his early speeches, he spoke of the purifying fire, of the sleeping church that must awaken, and of the end of the spiritual indifference. Harsh words, phrases that few popes would dare to utter. It is rumored that he owns privileged access to confidential documents, Vatican secret archives. Some they claim that there is read uncanonized gospels, apocryphal texts and records that would radically change the official history of Christianity. Is Leo XIV the fulfillment of a prophecy, a radical reformer, or the last pastor before the storm? In a private homily, addressed to a select group of monks, he is said to have uttered a chilling phrase: "The roar does not announce glory, it announces judgment." It is true, that the election of Leo XIV has not brought calm. It has brought questions, it has brought expectation, it has brought trembling, and while millions they observe, admired or uneasy, a sensation begins to settle in the heart of the faithful. Time is running out. The crowd was still meeting in St. Peter's Square. Night had fallen, but no one moved. Everyone was waiting for a word, a gesture, a sign. And then, from the central balcony of the Vatican, appeared, he didn't smile. He didn't get up. The arms. He just watched in silence, as if contemplating centuries' integers in a single instant. Then he spoke. "I haven't come to please the world. I have come to remember who is your true king." A whisper. He walked around those present. Some applauded. Others cried. Others they just stayed motionless, as if a buried truth had been awakened in the depths of their souls. Leo XIV did not promise times of peace. He did not offer comfort. He offered a mission, a purification, an urgent call. And while his figure faded away in the twilight of the balcony, many they understood that a new era was not only beginning for the Church, but for the whole humanity. What do you think about Leo XIV? Is he a chosen one or a herald of the final judgment? Leave your comment and share this mystery. With Who is Looking for Answers, and subscribe to find out the secrets that are still hidden from us.